Hey, it's Pastor Doug, and I'm here to tell you another Jack Tale. Hope you've been enjoying these as much as I've been enjoying telling them and learning a little bit about how God might have us to live along the way. As there was a time whenever Jack was out to seek his fortune, but he was having a terrible time at it. He had gone to one place after another. Nobody needed no help, and if they did need help, they had nothing to pay him. Why, he'd gotten so bad along there that he hadn't had much to eat for a while, and so he was getting pretty skinny. In fact, he'd gotten skinny enough that he was even getting a little bit weak and didn't even know if he could work if someone offered it to him. But he wasn't one to give up, and so he just pushed on. Come up to one old house, and he had knocked on the door, and this old big woman come up to the door and said, "Oh, what a little boy like you want around here." Says, "Oh, I'm just looking to get me up some work. Didn't know if you had anything around here." She just eyed him up and down a little bit and says, "Oh, you don't look like you could do much. You're not good shape." Says, "Oh, I just had a streak of bad luck. Why, just a little bit of food and some good water, and I'd be ready to go." And she said, "Oh, that sounds all right. Well, I'll tell you what, I'll bring you in and get you something to eat tonight. And if you work all day tomorrow, why, then I'll keep you on." Jack thought that was a good enough deal, so he got inside the house, but she didn't want him in for very long. She just set down the rules and sent him out to the barn to live. Why, he just made him a place out there in the hay, and after having to eat a little bit with what she sent out to him with, and got him something to drink out of the trough that the cows was a drinking out of, he just laid down on the hay and went to sleep. And the next morning he was feeling a right bit better. Why, that old woman had him do chores around the house. Why, he had to work inside and chop firewood and haul up water, and he did it well. And that woman was pretty impressed, and so she kept him on. Day after day, she'd just put more and more work on him, and Jack was always up to the task. She wanted him to go out and pull all the weeds. He'd go pull them all out. If he wanted to go up and work down into the wheat, he'd work down in the wheat. He'd get out the tares and work in real hard. Wanted him to go down and haul up more water, he'd haul up. Hauling firewood, didn't matter. He did it and did it well. But his girls, and she had 3 of them, got to thinking that perhaps the mom didn't need them around. And so they decided that what they needed to do was just run Jack off because, why, he was just getting along too well. And they didn't like that. And so they decided they was just going to run him off. They got together and started talking about it, and they decided to run him off by trying to starve him to death. Why, that woman quit feeding him. Said if he wanted to eat something, he could just eat what the cows were eating. Well, he didn't really care for hay, and so he didn't get much nourishment out of it, but he'd give it a try. He just survived on water, and pretty soon he started a shrinking down to just nearly like he was when he showed up. But he was getting hungrier and hungrier. Why, whenever they'd have a mealtime and he'd show up maybe wanting to get something, they'd make sure that he was out getting wood, and that's when they'd eat. He'd get back, there'd be nothing left. They'd do the same thing, whether they'd send him down to fetch water or working out in the field or whatever it was. They'd eat when he was gone, and so there just wasn't any food, even for him to snitch some. And he got smaller and smaller and smaller. He didn't know what he was going to do. There's one time when he had taken one of the bulls out, and he was working with this big old black bull and trying to figure out what he was going to do, and he just collapsed. He was overwhelmed. He didn't know what he was going to do, and he just said, I guess I'm just going to have to I don't know what I'm going to do." And he just broke down and started crying because he didn't know what he was going to do. He didn't want to give up, but he didn't have no strength. And that's whenever the old bull spoke to him. "Well, what are you doing over there? We've been working good out here. How come you all weepy like that?" Jack looked up and said, "Are you talking to me?" "Why, who else would I be talking to?" And so Jack shared his woes with him about having no food when he showed up and having no food now that he was working every day. And he just didn't know how long he could keep the work up. He was just getting less and less done, and he knew they'd try to just get rid of him. And that old bull says, well, I'll tell you what. Why, you just take this horn on my right side off, and it'll give you milk to drink. And if you take this horn on my left side off, it'll give you bread to eat. And Jack says, oh, I can't believe it. But he was so hungry, he was willing to try it. And sure enough, he got him some bread, and he drank him up some milk, and he'd put those horns back on that bull. And every evening, Jack would work. He would work hard as he could because he wanted to prove himself well. He wanted to show himself a good worker. And at the end of the day, not getting any food and having nothing left over because they're trying to run him off, why, he'd go out and he'd get with that bull and he would eat and he would drink. And why, he started gaining some flesh. He started getting bigger and bigger. And then that's when the old woman couldn't figure it out. How could he look so healthy, have so much energy, even put on some weight whenever he should be starving to death? She decided that she would just send out the daughters to spy on him and figure out what he was doing. The first one went out, and she got out there to looking around, and she looked with her one eye, and sure enough, she just saw Jack out there sitting with that bull, and she thought she was hidden real well, but Jack seen her, and so he pulled out his fiddle and he played a nice tune, and he just watched that one eye shut. And whenever she was good and asleep, why, he took off them horns and had him a feast and put them back on and got ready for the next day. Why, whenever the old woman quizzed her daughter about it and she said she'd seen nothing and then had to admit she'd gone to sleep, she sent the second daughter out. She had two eyes. Why, she got both of them out there. She tried to hide behind a cluster of rocks looking down to where Jack and that bull was at because they was getting awful friendly. They knew something was going on there. But Jack spied her too, and he played that fiddle tune. By the time both of them eyes shut and went to sleep, Jack had a feast. The next morning, why, that old girl had to go and tell her mama that she hadn't seen nothing either. And that's when she sent the third daughter out. She came out there and she was a spying on Jack with all three of her eyes. Why, Jack seen her and he commenced to playing just like with the other ones. One eye closed, the other eye closed. But that third eye would never get quite closed because the mama had told her if she'd come back without seeing something, she was going to beat her to death. Why, that eye would just finally get to sleep and it'd pop back open. Finally get to sleep, pop back open. Why, Jack was watching her and he thought he'd finally played her to sleep. And that's whenever he went to having himself a feast, but that third eye didn't fully close, and she's glimpsed just enough to see what old Jack was a-doing. She went home and told her mama what was happening, and her mama says, oh, that's what's going on. I should have known what was going on. Yeah, well, I'll tell you what, we're just going to get rid of that bull, and then we can get rid of that Jack. And so she made a plan that that's what she was going to do. But Jack, whenever he was carrying in a big old load of work, had heard what she had said. And he went out to the field with that bull and said, what are we going to do? She wants me to lead you in there, and whenever you do, she's going to kill you. He said, oh, don't worry about that. Why? When we get in there, I'm going to throw a fit. I won't let nobody near me, not her, not no one else. I'm only going to let you get near. Why, you come in with your old chopping axe like you're going to give me a whack, and whenever you do, you just whack that old woman on the head, and when she flops over, why, you jump on my back, and we'll make a break for it. That's about the only way we'll do it. Jack says, what do you mean? He said, hadn't you figured it out? Why, she's an old witch of a giantess, and those are 3 giantess daughters. And she's going to come and get us, but if you knock her out, and while she's completely senseless, why, her spell will go down that's on me, and we'll be able to get out of her reach. Jack thought was a great plan. So they come in there the next day. That old bull started throwing a fit. She threw the girls one way or another when they tried in to bind him. That old giantess come in trying to grab him, trying to get hold of him, and he gored at her and fought with her, and pretty soon she was off. But Jack got close enough, and he just sort of stopped. And that old woman says, "Oh, Jack, that's what you'll do for me today. You've been a good worker. Now you kill that old bull. Kill him good." He said, "Well, I'll need you to help me. I don't know if I can swing and hit him the way he's moving around." And so sure enough, that old woman got right up there, got hold of one of them horns. Jack pulled back that axe, and as he was bringing it around, he spun it around so that the end of that axe whacked right on that old giantess head, and it clucked her cold right out. And as soon as she was out, part of her spell began to break, but not the whole of it. Why, Jack jumped on the top of that bull, and he took out, and they made their way up and over the mountain and down on the other side. But it wasn't far enough to get out of the territory. They'd stopped to get themselves something to drink, and as that old bull was a-drinking, the water started a-bubbling up blue. Old bull said, "Oh, it's not a good sign to see this blue." Jack said, "What do you mean?" He says, "Why, you think I'm the only one that's been witched by that old woman? No, sir. We're going to run into another bull, a blue one, and we'll have to have a fight down to nearly the end. But if I can lick him good, the spell will be broken for him, and so I got to do it, so at least one of us gets free." Jack didn't really understand what the bull was a-talking about, but sure enough, they hadn't gone very far. On the other side of the trail, there was this great big old blue bull. And it was a stamping and a snorting, and it started a running in, and that black bull come up. They locked horns together. They started fighting and feuding and goring at each other. It was a mighty vicious battle, but that black bull licked him good. Finally got him down on the ground where it could hardly breathe. He took his old horn and just jabbed down into him and wounded him hard, but not enough to kill him, but bring him just near. It got near enough to death that old witch's spell was broke. And as it broke, that bull just turned right into another boy. Jack couldn't believe it. Why, there he was, but he still had that old gore in his chest. So that bull told Jack to get to working on him. And so Jack started stopping the blood and started binding him up and just did everything he could to get that fella back to life. It took all day that day and into the night, but he got to feeling a little bit better. And into the evening, that old bull said, "Now you pull off this one instead of food, you'll get something to put in there and it'll get him better." And that salve that came out, sure enough, made that boy right in his own mind. He couldn't believe that he was set free. So them two boys and that bull went right on the next morning as they got away. While they stopped to get something to drink, and it started bubbling up red. That old bitch said, oh no, not another one. This isn't good at all." And so, sure enough, they said, "You got to do it. You got one free. Maybe you can get another. Maybe you can lick this one too." That old black bull saw that red one that was on the other side. They run together. They hit each other. It was a mighty clash. Why, they struggled and they fought and they did everything they could. And sure enough, by the very end of it, that black bull had that red one down. And it just took his old horn and jabbed it in there. And sure enough, just nearly killed it. And when it nearly killed it, it set that boy free. And whenever that boy got right in his right mind, Jack and that other one started working on him, making sure he was breathing, making sure there wasn't nothing broken, and taking some of that salve and putting it inside that old wound and watching him get better and get better. Why, he went all the way into the night, and the next day there's now 3 boys and that old bull, and they started going. They didn't go very far and started getting them something to drink, and it started bubbling up white. When it started bubbling white, the old bull said, "Oh, I've been working so hard and fighting so hard. I don't know if I could fight that much anymore. It might be me instead of it that gets slicked this time, but I'll give it my best." And sure enough, as they'd gone a little further, there was a great big old white bull. And that white bull come a-charging down, and the black one didn't seem like it had a chance. They hit, and that white one just pushed it over, but he got up again. They racked their horns together, and they pushed up against trees and knocked over rocks. They knocked each other down and back up again. It was a long and hard battle. And then finally, at the very end of it, that black one got a lucky steer, and he just put his horn right in there and wounded that white one, and then wounded it again almost to death. Sure enough, all them boys jumped on that last one, and they started binding him up and putting in the salve, and them 3 boys got all to feeling better during the night. But they didn't know what they was going to do with the last one. And that old bull says, "Well, it comes down to this. We was the last ones to all come here together, and all of us got under a spell with that old witch. But ever since her spell got weakened, and the further we get away, why, all we have to do is just get up over that next hill, and then you're going to have to wound me, and it's going to be a battle, and I don't know how you're going to do it. But I'll tell you what, if you just take these 2 horns of mine, and instead of getting salve out of them and getting anything else, you tie them together with an old rope, and they'll be able to work and hard anything you want to do. Why, you just take one and you sling it around the other, and they'll start to goring and starting to stabbing, but you're going to have to pull them off before they go too far." Again, Jack said, "Oh, it's going to be an amazing thing." The other boys was just as confused as him, but they went on, and the next day when they got up over that hill, that old bull got to the other side, and instead of going on, it turned around and it started stampeding right at Jack. Even though it didn't have the horns no more, it was a mighty beast, and it come charging in right on to Jack, and Jack didn't know what he's going to do. He got them old horns, and he just slung them at it. When they went around, it wrapped right around that old bull's neck, and it started a jabbing and poking and sticking all over him, and he started a slowing and slowing, but he was trying to get faster. He got right up to all them boys and collapsed. Jack and them boys had a time grabbing them old horns and cutting the strap that held them together, pulled them apart and kept them away, while they had a hold on them and pull them down, and they kept trying to get over to that bull, and sure enough, they finally settled them down to where they wasn't doing nothing. And whenever that was broken, that old black bull turned into a black boy. Why, that just got it together, and they couldn't believe it. I said, "Oh, he's been wounded the worse." And they got to that salve that they had left over and put it in each of his wounds. And they did everything they could to help him out. And sure enough, he started to getting better late into the night. And that night, all of them boys and Jack decided they'd take off before they had any more trouble. And they didn't take them horns with him because they was afraid they might get after them somehow or another. And they just took off and went over another hill and on another dell, and they made themselves into a valley where they come to a place where Jack knew where he was. He told them fellas, says, "Oh, I'm almost home, and you fellas ought to come with me. Why, there's a king there that's always got good things going on. We got witches and giants too, but we always got people working and fighting against them." And them boys decided that they might just make it that way, but they didn't want to stay with Jack. Each one of them decided right there, since they had been set free, that each one would seek their fortune. And every one of them did. And they'd run into each other every now and then and tell each other their adventures. And that's the story of Jack and the Bull. Now, I tell you that because you never know who might be helping you, and you don't know what spell they might be under. In fact, there are still spells in the sense that we ourselves are struggling against our own flesh, and we have to let Jesus come into our lives and put us to death so that we can be born anew and live free in Him. And that's the end of that.